let's do our preview. Bengals and Ravens. It's interesting, right? Because I think going into the year, people didn't really expect Pittsburgh to be a team that was a lock to make the playoffs, right? I actually did pick them to go to the playoffs. I picked 3 teams going to the playoffs, and the AFC North obviously was very wrong when it comes to that. But I think most people would say it was probably a 2-horse race for the division between the Ravens and the Bengals, and that's a lot of Cincinnati people there in that mix that were giving the Bengals a real chance here. I think nationally most people thought, the Ravens are going to run away with the division, then go on their way to another postseason run, of course, with Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh. And it hasn't really materialized that way. As they got things going, it was kind of clunky. When Lamar was healthy there early in the year, they were scoring a lot of points. But that defense, you watch that defense and you go, that doesn't look like a Baltimore Raven defense. That looks like one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. And let's not pretend that Suggs and Ed Reed and Ray Lewis are still playing. But in recent years, there's still been elements of that Baltimore Ravens style defense. In the beginning of this year, you're looking around like, that looks like the Bengals, their own defense, like just not good whatsoever. And you had faith, I think, as just a fan of the NFL that, Harbaugh, he's going to figure this thing out. There's a reason why he's been in place so long. There's a reason he's a Super Bowl champion. There's a reason he's getting paid as much money as he is. He knows what he's doing. It's not going to look like this throughout the duration of the year. And sure enough, they've cleaned that up, right? Are they as good as they were in 2000? Absolutely not. But they're a competent defense that can go out there and win football games. And obviously, with the state of this division, good enough to go out there and win this division. And, it's funny. They started off, 1-5 on the season, did the Baltimore Ravens, and people are like, what in the world is going on with Baltimore? Like, they're a complete mess. Like, they're going to miss the playoffs. Harbaugh might be gone. Lamar, what's going on? He's not playing. He's hurt again. And, Vegas basically said, not so fast here. And they had that 1-5 record. And Vegas was like, well, they're still going to go out there and probably win this division. And then you blank, and all of a sudden they've won 5 straight, and they're 6-5. So I get it when you're looking at that from an NFL perspective. You're like, oh, yep, that's what we anticipated. Here come the Baltimore Ravens. But let's not act like this is a Ravens team from a couple of years ago, right? They've had great opportunities past 2-3 years to go win a world championship. They had enough pieces there. They had the quarterback in place. He was healthy enough, right? They had a good defense. They had a running game, right? They made the move for Derrick Henry, great head coach, and they weren't able to capitalize. And, obviously a lot of people have struggled beating Kansas City in the AFC here in recent memory. But you take a look at some of these games. Yeah, they're winning, and they deserve credit for it. But, one, they're not beating, teams like the Rams and the Patriots, right? They're definitely beating up on some weaker opponents. And when you see how they operate, they're not like, oh, that's the Baltimore Ravens. It looks very clunky. It looks very unorganized and a little bit dysfunctional, right? And that offensive line, they got some serious issues along the interior of their offensive line. And even with a mobile quarterback like Lamar Jackson, if you give him interior pass rush, that can be something that is very, very difficult to handle. We'll talk about the matchup with the Bengals' run-stopping ability or lack thereof on defense here in a second. But Ravens, they got questions along their offensive line. Lamar, he's back, but he doesn't look like Lamar Jackson out there. Obviously, it's been well documented. Part of the reason why he's one of the best players in the National Football League is he came in, obviously, as a running quarterback, and he has done a tremendous job into developing into a pocket guy, right? Lamar Jackson, past couple of years, very accurate from within the pocket, very accurate throwing the ball down the football field, but that's still not the same player when he doesn't have that ability to escape and go on these long runs. Now, he's still moving around despite the injuries, and he's still coming up with runs, particularly on third down, but he doesn't look like the Lamar Jackson that we're all used to seeing. And it's not like he has aged overnight. That's not the issue here. He clearly is banged up, right? The hamstring, caused him to miss some time. It doesn't look like that is 100%. Doesn't look like he fully trusts it here at this point. And now this toe has popped up as well. Funnily enough, obviously Joe Burrow with the toe injury. Now Lamar's got one there as well. I think his official status as of now, he's listed as questionable, but I don't anticipate him potentially not playing. He was a full participant in practice yesterday, sat out the first day of practice, was a full go yesterday. And if you're a full go on a Tuesday with a Thursday night game, in my opinion, you're going to be just fine to go out there and play. But it's going to be very interesting to watch how well he can move around and if he really needs to move around, right? Because if the Bengals go against the Ravens like they did on the Thursday night game against Pittsburgh, where the pass rush was literally non-existent, he's going to be fine. He's just going to sit back there and, buy a little bit of time and then find somebody down the field, and the Bengals are going to get cooked. But with that issue that the Ravens have along their interior defensive line, that is something certainly you need to monitor very closely here in this football game. The first matchup, you talk about these matchups and keys to victory, what have you. The first thing that comes to mind for me is, are you going to be able to stop the run? The Bengals are giving up over 5 yards per carry, right? And you're going against Derrick Henry. That's not a good situation, right? And, the Bengals-Ravens games in recent years have been awesome. Like, just as a football fan, they've been great. Unfortunately for the Bengals, you've kind of ended up on the wrong side of the scoreboard relatively frequently because your defense can't do anything against Lamar. Lamar seemingly always goes off against you. But I feel like this game's going to be a little bit different from, a shootout perspective. I don't know necessarily. It wouldn't surprise me. But I wouldn't predict that this is going to be as high-scoring of an affair as some of the previous Bengals-Ravens matchups have been, because I think the Ravens are really going to lean on running the football, especially with Lamar clearly not fully healthy. The receivers for the Ravens, it's not like they got the Bengals receiving core, right? They, Zay Flowers and Bateman and an old DeAndre Hopkins. I expect Mark Andrews to have a big game. Every tight end, of course, seemingly does against the Cincinnati Bengals. But I think they're going to understand that, let's run the football here with Derrick Henry. The Bengals are giving up over 5 yards per carry. Let's try to get him going, right? The Bengals have, of course, struggled in the past with Henry, and he's, of course, one of those guys that you can hit him at, from an initial contact perspective, but he's going to fall forward and get a couple extra yards. And I think if the Ravens really lean on their run, they can chew that clock. It can be a fast football game, and, they can keep the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands. And, we all, when I ask Trags about this in a little bit, but we're all kind of wondering what we're going to get from Joe Burrow, right? Because if the Bengals get September Joe Burrow, they have no chance to win this game. We all understand that. But if they get Thanksgiving time Joe Burrow, probably going to have a good chance, and I would say probably going to win this football game if that is the case. But my guess here at this point is I think first quarter, it's going to be a feeling out process a little bit for Cincinnati. I'm not sure they're going to score early in this game. And, they're going to probably punt it a few times at the beginning of the game. This is just kind of what my gut tells me. And then the Ravens are going to get the football and run the ball and run it down the field and score. And next thing you know, you're going to blink, and it's already going to be halfway through the second quarter. And you're not going to have much going offensively. You're going to be behind on the scoreboard, and your defense is going to be kind of getting blasted in the run game. That's just kind of what my gut tells me. And then you're going to rely on Burrow kind of waking up a little bit after he gets out on the field the first couple of drives and then coming back in the football game. That's just kind of what my gut says at this point. But that's matchup number one. You want to talk about keys to victory or whatever, you got to slow down Derrick Henry a little bit in this game. If you're going to continue to give up 5 yards per rush, you're in serious trouble. If you're the Cincinnati Bengals. Then the other element of that, of course, is trying to find some level of pass rush. And again, I don't think we're going to see Lamar move as well as he typically does. Now, he's still probably going to move better than anybody you've seen this year, but it's not going to be the typical incredibly elusive Lamar Jackson that's literally impossible to bring down. So you look for somebody along the defensive line to step up. Right? And you've seen Myles Murphy in recent weeks it's like, well, okay, there maybe is a little bit something there. I think a lot of that is us just kind of being desperate, like just please, like show us something. And he has, right? But let's not sit here and act like he looks like a first-round pick and, the Bengals should keep him around in the future. That's not the situation here. Obviously, he's getting a lot of opportunity with Hendrickson out and Shamar Stewart, of course, on IR. Definitely going to ask Trags about the Hendrickson fiasco there as well. But Myles Murphy's a guy that needs to step up here in this game. He absolutely does. And then what are you going to do him from an interior perspective? B.J. Hill and T.J. Slayton, it has not been good this year. Again, said it 5 times, you're giving up over 5 yards per carry. That's not good. But this guard play for the Baltimore Ravens is not good. And it is not good at all. And there's going to be an opportunity to provide some interior pass rush. That's the worst thing in the world for a quarterback. If you're dropping back and you got dudes immediately in your face, it's one thing if you got them coming off the edge and then you can, feel it a little bit and step up and perhaps escape. If they're just running through your offensive guards and running right into your face, that can be very difficult to handle. So I'm looking for B.J. Hill and T.J. Slayton. They've struggled a lot. They've been better these past 2 weeks. They need to play well for Cincinnati in this game. And then also you got to build off the tackling, right? It's very unfortunate that, look, the defense has been downright horrendous when you look at big picture this year. We all understand that. It doesn't take a genius to point that out. But at the same time, you have to say, well, the past 2 weeks, the past 2 games against Pittsburgh, and of course last week against New England, it was good enough to win football games, right? If the defense played like they did against New England and against Pittsburgh throughout the entirety of this year, and the Bengals still had this record, we would be having a totally different conversation. Then I probably, honestly, would be going at Zach Taylor saying, how are you losing these games? Your defense is playing fine. We've talked about this all off season. We talked about it all throughout the beginning of the season. The way this roster is organized, the way that you have structured your pay and the resources that you've allocated to your top-end players that play offense, it's not ever going to be an elite defense. You can win with a top 15 defense. Maybe even top 20. I don't know. If you're a top 10 defense, boom, you're really a Super Bowl contender. And, I think the Bengals, the way they've played this past 2 weeks, top 20 defense. That should be enough to get you some wins, and obviously it wasn't the past 2 weeks. But from a tackling perspective, you have to build off that. It's funny, I got a notification on my phone yesterday about voting for Barrett Carter for Defensive Rookie of the Week. It kind of made me laugh out loud a little bit, but, fair play to him. He had a lot of tackles in the game against New England, and that certainly was his best game. He made some mistakes, obviously, there in the game as well, but it was refreshing, I guess, to see him actually get guys on the ground. And the Bengals are going to have to do that again against Baltimore to have a chance, right? I mean, this Ravens team, I just talked about how they're not as good as they have been in recent years. If you miss tackles and, shoot yourself in the foot like that, you're not going to have a chance. So it'll be interesting to see how Barrett Carter and Geno Stone respond in this game for the Cincinnati Bengals, because say what you want about those two guys, we've ripped them apart all year. They played fine, and you could even say they played well on Sunday against New England. Geno Stone, of course, had his best play of the year with the pick six, kind of right place, right time thing. But, hey, he made a play, he capitalized, and it was 6 points for the Cincinnati Bengals. So how is he going to respond to that? Remember, this is his former team there as well. Is he going to show some more physicality? Is he going to be able to get guys down? Is he going to be able to make some plays in the back end? Right? I anticipate Lamar taking some shots in this game. Especially if they find themselves in short yard. I feel like they're gonna find themselves in 2nd and 1 a lot, or 2nd and 2 after a big run on first down. That's gonna open up some opportunities for them to take some shots down the field, and we'll see how the Cincinnati Bengals DBs are able to play when it comes to that. I think Jalen Davis certainly provided a spark last week. Would like to see more of him in this game. He was at that nickel spot for him. It's funny, because, I don't think many people were banging the table for Mike Hilton to come back. Obviously, it was very clear last year he couldn't run with the receivers anymore. He was getting taken off the field on 3rd down. He clearly was not a fan of that whatsoever, and it was probably the right move to move off him. But you could use a Mike Hilton from a couple of years ago. That certainly would help. You could use a Jesse Bates, obviously, there as well. So I think he got a bit of a spark there at that nickel spot, which was good to see from Jalen Davis. Just a grinder, right? It's a guy that's been around this team, this organization for a long time, practice squad guy, just shows up, plays well in the preseason. When he gets called up, he's a very serviceable player, and that provided their defense a little bit of juice there. So that was refreshing to see. Would like to see him get some more playing time as well on Thursday against the Baltimore Ravens. And then, of course, obviously, you got to talk about the offense, right? What are my expectations for the defense? There's a part of me that thinks they're going to hold Baltimore under 30, which some people laugh at that and say, well, oh yeah, bro, big deal there. But, this Bengals defense gets blown up by the Ravens. So I do have some optimism, I think cautious optimism, that they can hold this Ravens offense to under 30, but definitely going to be in the high 20s there for Baltimore. And then it's okay, how many points can you score as an offense? And we alluded to this earlier in the segment. Gut tells me it's going to take Joe Burrow a second to, feel things out, right? You can take as many practice reps as you want. You can go through the week. You can throw routes on air. You can do 7-on-7. You can do 11-on-11 stuff in practice with your teammates. But until the bullets are out there flying and you got guys in purple trying to take your head off in a hostile environment, it's going to be different. And we'll see. We'll find out very quickly. If Joe Burrow takes a couple snaps and he's not moving whatsoever and he's getting blown up, we're going to all be like, oh boy, this is a serious mistake. But I don't think the Bengals would do that. I don't think Zach Taylor would do that. I don't think Joe Burrow would do that as well. I expect him to be moving around, not like peak Joe Burrow, but he's going to be moving around, protecting himself, operating within the pocket, eyes down the field, and he's got his boy out there, Jamar, right? So that's obviously a very, very big development for Cincinnati that he's coming back. But I would expect him to just take a little bit to get going, and then I think he'll look like Joe Burrow. And look, one thing about Burrow is he's always been at his best when the lights are the brightest. And, he wanted to come back for this game. I personally don't think he looks at the 3-8 record. I'm sure he's ticked off about it, but I don't think that phases him or that affects him up here as far as his mindset coming into this game. It's a rival, right? Lamar Jackson has had the better of him in this rival. I think that frustrates him. This is where, of course, he got hurt with the wrist a couple of years ago, was at this very venue at night against Baltimore, and I'm sure he wants to come back there, and I'm sure obviously he's been back there since, but come back there on a national stage Thanksgiving night and make some plays and ultimately try to pull off a big time upset for the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you remember what some of those Ravens fans were chanting after he got hurt, some of the derogatory stuff they were chanting towards Joe Burrow, I'm sure that's something that fueled him throughout his rehab process as well. So I expect him to be locked in. I think it's fair to say that it might take him a drive or two to settle down. He might punt it a few times early. If you don't, by the way, look out. But I think at some point the Bengals offense will get going, and this game has a lot of 28-27, 28-24 kind of feel for me. 27-24, somewhere in that range is kind of the feel for me in this game. And, I'm sure whoever possesses the ball last probably going to win the game. That's kind of how it works in this rivalry. But that's kind of my expectation here. And then you need Jamar to be great. Again, I think he's frustrated by the record. He's a little bit ticked off by it as well. But I think he's like, I got my boy back. I'm back from suspension. Last time I played, it was a team that I hated, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he didn't got a lot of love for the Baltimore Ravens either. I'm sure he's eager to go out there and to try to make some plays. I think he's got favorable matchups, right? I mean, Higgins and Cheeto are the corners for Baltimore. They're going to double him a lot. But, they've been putting Kyle Hamilton up near the line of scrimmage a lot and, asking him to blitz and, be a factor there in the run game. So you might not have to worry about him as much on the back end. I think Jamar's going to have some opportunities. I think Joe Burrow's going to do everything in his power to get him the football there as well. And one thing also I'm really looking forward to is the Mike Gesicki Joe Burrow combination, right? I was banging the table. Joe Burrow was banging the table. Got to get Mike Gesicki back. I had been very much with the Cincinnati Bengals like, yeah, this tight end comes in. He's great for a year, and then he kind of moves on. That had been kind of the theme here, of course, for a while. But then they said, we're going to bring Gesicki back. We're going to get him on a contract. Thought that was awesome. Then he gets hurt. Well, Burrow gets hurt. And then Gesicki, of course, gets hurt. We haven't really gotten to see that. If you remember, that tandem was awesome last year. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Gesicki in this game. And Zach Taylor talked about, yeah, he's technically a tight end, but that's the spot that he took Jamar's spot last week, basically, and that's apparently why Burton was still inactive. Probably not exactly the case, but that's how Zach Taylor, of course, explained it. So the Gesicki's going to have a lot of opportunities in this game, particularly on third down, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him and Burrow get back to work. We'll see how that chemistry looks, right, if that's something that they're able to pick right back up on or if it's going to take them some time. But Mike Gesicki, kind of a key factor in this game. And then, one thing the Bengals and Zach Taylor have not gotten enough credit for at this point are the developments of the run game. And I think, Chase Brown over the course of the past few weeks has done a really nice job. From a scheme perspective, Zach has done a nice job. And pitch, of course, there as well. The offensive line steadily improving and blocking a little bit more. So, if you can rely on the run in this game and you don't have to be in a spot where you got to say, you know what, time for us to pass, that's going to make, obviously, a lot of Bengals fans incredibly nervous, probably Zach Taylor as well, if you're putting Joe Burrow in obvious passing situations. If you can continue to improve here with this run game, you're going to be in a good spot. And the Ravens, they're not world beaters against the run, right? There's going to be opportunity for Cincinnati to run the ball. I would like that to be emphasized early from Zach Taylor and Dan Pitcher. And, I think you're really going to see Chase Brown open up a little bit more. That was kind of my thought process coming into the year. When you lost Zach Moss last year and it was basically the Chase Brown show, thought he was tremendous, and I thought this was going to be really, you could kind of call last year his breakout year, but I thought this was going to be the year that he kind of became a household name in the National Football League outside of just here in Cincinnati, and I think losing Joe Burrow really, really hurt him and his development a little bit. But I'm expecting Chase Brown to play his best football here down the stretch, because one very underrated part about Chase Brown's game is how good he is in the screen game. Obviously, he has a couple of drops out of the backfield this year, which is not ideal. But I think with the return of Burrow and Burrow's ability to extend plays, and if guys aren't there down the field, he can slip out of the backfield and catch a pass and go for 7, 8, 9 yards. I think that's going to be huge in this game as well. So I'm looking for Chase Brown to have a big game, looking for Mike Gesicki to have a big game there as well. And obviously, we're all interested to see what Yoshi looks like. I think Yoshi has stepped up the past 2 weeks against Pittsburgh and New England. It was a dreadful season for him leading up to those 2 games, but I've been impressed with what I've seen before. And again, he clearly had a rapport with Joe Burrow. And it's one thing to go out there and try to produce with Jake Browning and even Joe Flacco, but now your guy's back. Joe Burrow's back. Clearly, there was a connection there between them on third down and in the red zone. And assuming Jamar's going to get doubled a lot, he's going to have some opportunities in this game there as well. And we'll see if he is able to rise to the occasion for the Cincinnati Bengals. But I don't think it's going to be quite as much of a shootout as we've seen in recent battles between the Bengals and the Ravens. Feel like it's high 20s for both teams. Person or the team that possesses the football last probably going to have an opportunity to go down there and win. Kicking's going to be huge in this game. Always is. Bengals, Ravens. No Justin Tucker anymore, obviously. It's a loop. He's been solid for him. And McPherson having quietly a really good year for Cincinnati, but he hasn't been in a spot necessarily where he's had these huge pressure kicks. Don't be surprised if Evan McPherson finds himself in a spot where he needs to split the uprights late to tie the game or take the lead. And I feel good about that operation, right? I think past couple of years we haven't. As a rookie, it felt like it was automatic for Evan McPherson, and then you had changes with the holder, of course, changes with the long snapper there as well. But I feel good about that operation this year for the Cincinnati Bengals. Kicking game always going to be important. Baltimore, that's kind of an advantage they've always had over Cincinnati in these matchups, and that's allowed them to win some of these games. But I expect that to be a very significant development in the game as well. I would imagine Evan McPherson's going to have some opportunities, especially if the Bengals move the ball a little bit and the Ravens kind of bend but don't break on defense. He's going to have to make some long kicks on Thanksgiving night, and I look forward to that opportunity for him, and I'm ready for him to deliver there as well.